Hi, I'm Anna of All Trades, and today I'm making some colonial-style hardware for my Dutch tool chest, namely the handle.
I get my hands dirty, they show me no mercy, so I just keep working.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
I saw this handle design on an antique blanket chest at an antique store about 5 years ago, and I loved it because when you pick it up, these little tabs stop the handle from continuing to go up and pinching your hand. So when I went to build this chest, I had Caleb Nolen, the blacksmith at Homestead Heritage in Waco, Texas, design these handles based on some pictures I'd taken of that chest. And now it's my favorite handle for every chest ever. This is how the handles are mounted to the chest, and this is where they really shine because you put this whole assembly through the mounting plate, which is on the front of the chest, you drill through here, and then you spread and peen the legs out like this. With the legs fully peened out like this, you've got the weight of the chest fully supported not only on both of the legs, but also on the entire mounting plate. So were you to mount it with screws or nails or anything else, they would be in danger of pulling out along with the weight of the chest. But with this, unless those legs break, there's literally no coming out of the side of the chest. The first thing we need to do is size our material. I'm using 2-inch wide, 1/8 inch thick plate for the mounting bracket, and we'll cut it at 5.5 inches. Since we need 2 of them, we'll mark off 2 right off the bat. Next thing we need to do is make these little pins, and we'll do that out of 1/4 inch round stock. And because I want to be able to work it without tongs at first, I'm actually just going to cut some long pieces, and then I'll cut them off with the hot cut in the forge. The next thing that we need for the handle is the handle. While I was practicing, I found it much easier to start with smaller stock and to basically get used to making that bend repeatedly, and then to move to larger stock and, forge it out so that it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But I was able to make a bunch of these just out of 1/4 inch stock that were perfectly passable, and then move on to the larger 3/8 stock to forge out, again, a more aesthetically pleasing version. So we'll size a little bit of both. We need 12 inches, or really this is an arbitrary thing depending on how big you want your handle to be, but this is about 12 inches. How do you figure that out? You could either use a flexible tape measure, or sometimes when I have a really hard time getting my mind around things, I use clay to figure it out. And this is a trick I learned from my friend Craig, the Barefoot Forge. He taught me how to make Damascus using these layers, so that's what this is left over from. But it's a fantastic teaching tool and learning tool. So when we have it a little bit longer, we can start to figure out approximately how much we're going to need. And then we can also use that opportunity to work out just how we're going to make all of the bends and everything that need to be done. It's very possible to do this just with a hammer and anvil, but to make this a very repeatable process for me, I made this fixture. Do keep in mind that once you start using the thicker stock, you're going to forge some of that out, so it will get longer, but for the shorter stock, this works just fine. To forge out these plates, it's pretty easy. You're going to heat it up. You're going to secure it down. I made a little holdfast just for such a thing. And then you're going to use a punch. I also made this punch to punch it through, and we want to go most of the way through, and then we'll flip it over and punch it all the way through on the hardy hole. Biggest thing there is that during the punching process, you want to keep your punch nice and cool so you don't ruin the heat treating process. Because this is quite hot, I'm using a glove for my punch hand. We want to get one good punch, and then make sure we don't need to change positions at all, and then get a few good heat hits. But we want to take it up every time, A, so that we don't get too much of a heat transfer into the punch and ruin the temper, but also to keep checking our progress because you don't want that hole sliding around on you. So I'm gonna quench this, put this guy back in. Oh, look at that water. Ha ha ha. Flip it over. There we go. That's punched. Now we just need to straighten it out a little bit. The hole's a little crooked. That can be fixed with a file. Obviously, it should be fixed by being better at punching, but now, once it's mostly straight, we can start doing some of the more decorative forging aspects. So we want to, getting in here where we can just bevel that edge, we'll take it from being just a plain piece of punched plate and make it look like fully hand-forged hardware. I'd say that looks pretty dang good. We'll have a little file work to open that up a little bit, and other than that, it's looking very nice. First thing we want to do on this one, isolate the tip. We want to draw it out a little bit and flatten it out a little bit. Now you always want to work your steel when it's quite hot, but especially with mild steel, you do have a little bit of wiggle room, and I want to do all my straightening blows when it's cooler, and I can also kind of get an idea of what's going on with this thing. So because we're going to turn this into a pin, we want here and here to really thin out, and then we'll have all of the meat there in the center for the eye of the pin. So now we're going to isolate this area so that we can start to forge that out while it's still attached to the bar. Peter Ross told me something really helpful one time. He said, if you see a crooked bar, figure out how you can fix it in one blow so you're not constantly chasing your tail. And so I try to always look at the bar and see what it needs before I start doing anything extra. Okay, so now we're ready to hot cut that. Oops, well, so we've got our piece isolated from the bar now, and we'll put it in. So now we want to visually identify where the basic center of it is. So holding a little piece of round stock in my hand, I can control the pin and also make it round the way I want. And I did get those reins a little bit mismatched there, but I can easily take care of that in post because that's basically exactly what I want to see with this. So that thing's done. Now we'll do another one. The last little bit is to forge the actual handle. It's at this point we get to use our bending fixture that we made. So I had welded the little grabber down there so we could pinch it up in the vise, which gives us a nice place to grab it. And we've got our bending wrench ready, we've got our hammer ready, and as soon as we get a heat, we can put it in this form and bend it. Just to give you a little visual example of what we're doing here is we've got a little bit of extra room, but we can basically bend it to those parameters. I'd said when we cut out our stock that it is a lot easier to practice with smaller stock, and you'll get perfectly acceptable results with this. They just won't look nearly as nice as if you start with wider stock and kind of forge out the ends. So if you are going to use that wider stock, think about the fact that this is going to grow as you forge it out. So I do suggest that you start with that smaller stock and get used to the bends and forming this shape, and then move on to using that thicker stock, draw out the ends, and do the exact same process you're about to see here. Whether you're using small or large stock, you want to peen out the ends just a little bit because it's just going to make it look that much nicer. Okay, so with this, we want to find what is hopefully the center. So the trick here is that we want to get this fun little bend here, but we also want to keep those pretty straight. But this fixture gives us a little bit of a true north as far as keeping the handle portion nice and flat. And we can take this back to the anvil and make it do a little bit more what we want it to do. So before we take anything out of the forge, we want to know exactly what we're going to do. So we always want to have the tools laid out and ready for us, and we also want to just kind of have a plan. We want to have it grabbed on the right side. We want to know exactly where we're going to take it, because especially on small stock like this, it loses its heat really quickly. So with this one, we know that we need that side, so we're already on the right side, and we know we need that side to squish down a little bit. So we're going to come over to the anvil. We need this rein to stay straight, and we want this top little section to come down. If we can just fix this bend a little bit with our bending wrench, this one is pretty much ready. So we're going to fix this bend just a little bit, and now we're going to pull this back straight. That's not too bad at all. We just want the angles basically to be right, and they are. So I'm going to put it in the fire one more time. I'm going to grab it with two different sets of pliers, and I'm going to pull it out. Then we're going to straighten it up and bend over the little hand protector thingies. And now we have kind of our last chance to take some last looks here. We want to make sure that the handle doesn't have any high spots, and that all looks really good. I'm going to clip those off, so I'm going to actually just take one last little gander here. Looks really good. Now we'll quench it and cut those little reins off. There we go. So we can't do a ton to these because they're already bent, but as much as we can dress them up a little bit, and next time we can measure a little better. Now just making sure, once again, nothing really happened to the geometry. Looks pretty good, looks pretty good. So now we can try it for size with our little pins. Works great. And now it's ready to mount on its little mounting plate. As I mentioned at the beginning, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, an awesome, easy to use platform where you can create a stunning website for yourself. I've been using Squarespace since I started my business in 2012. It is really easy for someone who's not very tech savvy like me to drag and drop and create a stunning website with all my needs. I have a commerce section so you can buy merchandise or products that I create and sell. I have a blog, I can host photos and videos, and it's just a great resource for me. Make sure you go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/AnnofAllTrades to save 10% on your first purchase of a website or domain. Squarespace provides beautiful designer templates that you can just drag and drop your material into, and Squarespace also offers incredible customer support 24/7. So we've got our hardware done. We take our pin, we put on our handle, then we have it assembled here, and that's ready to mount on our chest. Again, these were just example pieces done with that smaller stock, but of course too you can use the larger stock, taper it out, put on your pins, and mount them on your faceplate, ready to go. So there you have it. A colonial style handle for whatever chest you'd like to mount it on. Make sure you stay tuned for forging the hinges for the chest as well.